preparedness company and believe it's every person's patriotic duty to achieve true freedom from our world's increasingly unreliable and fragile systems. The best way to do this is to invest in your personal liberty, because you can't rely on governments or corporations for the basics of life. Act now and secure at least a 4-week emergency food kit full of tasty meals that provide 2,000 calories a day. They have dozens of emergency food storage kits to choose from, along with a variety of survival products. Despite these difficult times, My Patriot Supply has kept their commitment to you with well-stocked emergency supplies. They will deliver them quickly and discreetly with friendly 24/7 customer service. Stay alert and prepared, friends. Let everyone else take tomorrow for granted. Go to preparewithgroundzero.com. That's preparewithgroundzero.com.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and hermaphrodites, my fellow slaves of the global plantation. The Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but so much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show, where the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking Satanists is Vinny's jokes. And my very special guest joining me today is a fellow talk radio show host on the Ground Zero Radio Network, the quite lovely Michael Sherwin. Mike, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Vinny.
Can you, I've got a little bit of technical glitches. I've had a big day yesterday doing some fundraising, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm behind the 8 ball, as it were. So just before we begin, Ground Zero Radio Network is, like, I think the one word that you could use to describe it is wow. Right? And these guys have created such an incredible platform with a great app, and they've told us actually, and I'm going to do this voluntarily regardless of whether or not I was told, to promote that app and for people to go to groundzero.radio and pick it up on your phone so that you can listen to this broadcast and others wherever you go. And it was quite interesting on that webcast there, right? Because you realize that there's no lack of talent on the network. You know, every network I've been on, without fail, not to insult any of the program directors or something, but some of the hosts are just average. But on Ground Zero, they're all truly exceptional. And Mike, it's a wonder to be counted and a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Please give us a little bit of background on who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I'm a Canadian guy. Back probably around 2008, I really got back into the whole conspiracy thing. Started like falling down a rabbit hole, and that's where I met Rob Davenport, the guy who started Aftermath and Ground Zero Radio. Like he's the guy that built all the back end stuff for the network, all that. Convinced Clyde to come on board to help us promote the platform and stuff. And then from there with Clyde as a I guess you could say lead-in host through his producer Ron Patton. Ron has a ton of contacts and knows how to like spot really good talent in this field. So Ron was able to curate the current list of hosts that we have on the network, which is awesome. He's done an excellent job, and he's still searching out, looking for new people to come join us. And then, yeah, I guess for me, like after I met Rob and stuff, we started working together with on this podcast called The Jungle Apocalypse. We're no longer doing that show because we're invested in doing like all the back end work and stuff for the network now, which is a challenge in its own. But yeah, we had a decent little podcast for a while, and just working with Rob through that, he offered me the opportunity to come on board with Aftermath. I think it was around 2019 when he was just getting things set up, which happened to work out great for me because in 2020, my previous job as a baker was the contract for the union I was working for was bought out by the company I was working at, and I needed a job. So it worked out perfect for me. And that's how I landed my spot here.
Wow. I mean, it was a little bit more difficult for me to land a spot on the network. I think I'd been doing this gig. I mean, but in fairness, I'm much further away from Source. Did you know it cost $10,000 thereabouts to get to Los Angeles from Auckland, New Zealand? That's an unbelievable amount of money just to go from point A to point B, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it's about 15,000 Canadian dollars for me to fly to New Zealand.
Whoa.
That's because of the location I'm at in Canada. I'm in a province called Saskatchewan, which is right in the middle of the country. And it's like really remote to get anywhere. Like all of our flights out internationally are like almost double anywhere else in Canada. We have to make many stopovers and layovers too. Plus for me, I have to pay extra because I can't go over the US.
You can't?
No.
Why not?
Because I was a dumb kid and got caught with weed in Canada, so now I'm persona non grata to the US.
You would have been on the no-fly list kind of thing, you know, after 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, it's stupid how things work. I mean, I've got a cannabis conviction from when I was like 20, 19 maybe, and I wonder why and how they can justify, like, 20 years later, this guy's still not trustworthy enough to come into the United States. You know, he might cause some trouble.
Yeah, but the way I look at it, it's the way their laws are structured there, and seeing as marijuana is a Schedule I drug in the United States, which is like the worst classification for a drug out there. If it's on that list, it's bad. There's like 3 of them, and that's I believe it's marijuana, cocaine, and methamphetamine.
Yeah, and they're not even in the same ballpark, you know. It's like you got people out there who smoke weed every day, and then you got people out there who do cocaine every day, and people out there who do methamphetamine every day, and they're 3 completely different people. One of them is robbing a liquor store, and forgets to sleep. By the way, did you know what one of the main benefits to long-term methamphetamine use is?
No.
There's only about 12 more sleeps till Christmas.
Oh, as someone who used to struggle with that drug, I can totally agree with that statement there.
I also find it's something of a misnomer, but regardless, your talk radio show, what is it called? What time is it on? Let's do the whole basic promotional gamut, shall we?
Oh, right now I've just been doing guest appearances on other shows on the network lately. I don't have a show at the moment. Rob and I are kind of looking at bringing back a show. It's just the way things are working on the back end with the network at the moment. We haven't had time to sit down and plan one out yet, but we are working on it, and hopefully we'll have a new show coming out soon.
Well, that sounds great, because honestly, the world needs more people speaking out, and it's not necessarily so much about the quality of voices, really. I think it's just anybody who speaks out in any way, shape, or form is better than nobody speaking out, right?
Well, hey, 3 guys that do podcasts about the Canadian government from their basements actually got called out by Justin Trudeau in one of his French interviews about 3 guys in their basements doing podcasts against the government.
Were you one of those guys?
No, but these are a couple guys I just started following recently on YouTube, and I was like, yeah, like it makes sense. Now I understand a lot of what Justin Trudeau's going off about lately, about his like getting hassled by people on the internet and stuff, because like I I'm on social media, but I tend to avoid a lot of the political postings on social media and go more for the funny memes.
Yeah, like Jabba the Trudeau.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about this concept as well, because Canada and New Zealand are sort of like, we're right next to much larger neighbours that are still English-speaking countries, and because of our accents of our respective countries, we often get confused as being from those neighbouring countries, which pisses us off majorly, because we don't want to be associated with kind of thing. But it's the former British banking colony model. It basically means that New Zealand's a big money laundering hub, and a whole river of dirty money flows through here every year. I think we got mentioned 66,000 times in the Panama paper money laundering leaks back in the day. And
oh, you guys actually had like 6,000 more than Canada.
Yeah. And so the fact of the matter is, because we're not the big ones, New Zealand's not Australia and Canada's not the United States, you wouldn't really suspect that we're actually where the bulk of the dirty money comes through in those particular areas of the world.
Well, that's because like you mentioned, it's a lot to do with the way we've modeled our banking systems on the British banking systems, which were basically modeled on the Rothschilds banking systems of basically money laundering. Like you can trace it back to like the 1700s and Jacobs Rothschild starting his first bank.
Yep.
And unfortunately, our Commonwealth countries have copied that model. And I think the reason why small countries like Canada and New Zealand are used for these purposes is because it's less likely to be picked up by our financial institutions, because it's such a small nation. There's such small population-wise nations.
You might be right about that. I think it's specifically because, like, let's say, for example, the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands is the Northern Hemisphere equivalent of New Zealand, believe it or not, in terms of banking, money laundering, organized crime. And this is a kind of like a hugely corrupt country, but it's so corrupt that no corruption gets reported, so nobody knows that it's corrupt. Like, that's how corrupt it is.
Oh, kind of like the old Panama before they got rid of Noriega there.
Yeah. Noriega. I don't even know. I'm familiar with that particular strain of history. If you could fill me in, perhaps.
Oh, during the Iran-Contra scandal, there was part of the thing was in Nicaragua. There was the guy in charge of Nicaragua was this Manuel Noriega, and he was like one of the biggest cocaine suppliers in the world, and he also ran the country of Nicaragua. So the CIA with the U.S. Army got together and used several heavy metal songs blasted at 11 to drive the guy crazy and drive him out of his compound so they could arrest him. And he was basically involved in money laundering and drug trafficking for the big cartels out of Colombia there.
That reminds me of...
he was the middleman guy.
It reminds me of, what's his name? Michael C. Rupert from thewilderness.com. He, I think that might have been the first conspiracy theory documentary presentation that I ever saw, to my knowledge. It might have been back in 2003 or 4. And he was talking about how the job of the Central Intelligence Agency is actually to manage the US economy by ensuring that enough liquid cash is in the economy at any one time so that all creditors who do need to be paid on the day can be. Because let's say you've got, $200 billion worth of credit card debt or something like that, and you need, let's say, $20 billion a day of liquid cash to be able to service that debt. Where do you think you're going to find $20 billion worth of liquid cash other than drug dealing through the CIA, flying all around the world with billions of dollars worth of cocaine on board and big bags marked evidence,
Well, hey, the CIA learned in the 40s when they started doing all those banana republics that it was really easy for them to go in there with the backing of, or the financial backing of large corporations, basically funding their operations for them, to go in, take over the economies and the governments of these once sovereign nations, and basically put them under the yoke of big business and the CIA running the show. So if the guy that's running the country isn't going to play ball with the big corporations no more, the CIA goes in, takes them out, and they all wash each other's hands.
It's a big club and you ain't in it, as George Carlin would say. And I think why drugs is such an important subject is because mankind has always been after them. You know, hey, have you got something that can allow me to think differently or help me to heal wounds that are inside that I can't heal otherwise? Are you able to put me into altered states of consciousness so I can think about things that I never thought before in ways that I couldn't possibly imagine? And what have you? No, I'm not interested, bro. I just want to have another beer and watch some more sport. Actually, I'll be fine. Don't worry. I'm perfectly enlightened.
Yeah. I'm one of those people that does really believe in Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory, which is what helped us develop our consciousness, eating magic mushrooms. And it's a plausible theory for how humanity developed its consciousness, because it does open those doorways for you.
Yeah, I think Dr. Bob Malamud from the University of Georgia, I think it was, where he was lecturing, he was talking about how cannabis was essential in the evolution of the mind of the human species and capable of it, right? And I theorized that it was because we were the first ones with opposable thumbs for rolling joints.
That's a good possibility, yeah. But the thing is too, is like in some of the recent studies that they've done on cannabis, they've started finding that where they were thinking it was destroying neurons and neural pathways in the brain, it actually reinforces and builds new ones in the brain.
Yeah.
So it does alter the way you think, but in a more positive way than what they would have portrayed it earlier.
Sort of like a if you look at a spider web, when it's wet in the morning with that dew all over it, there's still just that same thread of that spider web, yet it's carrying all this extra weight, and yet it stays strong. And I think that's sort of a way of looking at it, whereby you can put extra weight onto the human brain, onto the human psyche, and if you've got the right strength there, it can take that extra weight and even look reasonably beautiful while it's doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of interested to start seeing some of the very first images from Elon Musk's Neuralink system. Like, we'll actually be able to start to see these pathways and stuff and map them out in an actual, like, almost realistic model. Like we're close with MRIs and stuff, but with that neural link implant in the brain, we're actually going to be able to start to see how these pathways and stuff are built, because it's going to have to figure out how to do that so it can properly interface with the brain.
That's right, and be able to see the neutrons and the neurons in all the morons. And I think it's also coming down to the point where we've forgotten what sci-fi movies were telling us in the 80s, and now we're in the sci-fi 80s, right? Does it feel like that now?
A lot of the stuff that growing up, like as a kid in the 80s, for sure, seeing a lot of the stuff that like we were talking about or seeing on shows like Star Trek, like the telecommunicators and things like that, we have that stuff now. Everybody carries it in the palm of their hand, like the tricorder from Star Trek. It's basically your cell phone. It's crazy, the stuff that like we have nowadays, and looking at it, seeing what was happening, and learning the stuff I've learned about predictive programming in the last like 30 years or so. It really enforces that like they've been gearing us up and building us up to start accepting these advanced technologies that we probably weren't quite ready for in the 80s.
Yeah, what's his name? Einstein said that once the population has technology that they're incapable of understanding, you will have a generation of morons. And somebody made a meme with that quote, and it had 4 friends sitting at a restaurant table, all of them on their phones, none of them looking at each other or talking to each other.
Yeah. Luckily, my friends and I, when we get together, we have a no phones rule, unless the phone is used to stream music to a Bluetooth speaker. That's it.
Yeah, I go one step forward and go like, Bluetooth, that's 30,000 microwatts just from your phone, and the 30,000 from the Bluetooth speakers, so that's 60,000 microwatts, even though you can only really detect about 30,000 on them on the Gauss, because if you've got 10 sources of 30,000, you can only pick up 30,000, even though you're getting 300,000, right? And that's why the New Zealand Ministry of Health deemed that in terms of microwave radiation, you're allowed 1 million microwatts, and it's considered safe. Their philosophy being that if it doesn't burn you or cook you, then it's all right.
Oh, that makes sense. And we're just starting to understand the effects of the radio waves that are around us all the time on the body. Like, although the human body is a very dynamic and impressive machine that's capable of withstanding quite a bit. So we do have that for us.
Yeah. I remember somebody was telling me, it's like, Vinny, no, it's not a machine. Okay, we're an organic organism. I remember, what was his name? HalfPastHuman.com's Cliff High. I told him one time that humanity's spirit's like a spring. You know, when you push a spring down, it kind of resists you. And if you push it all the way down, it resists you all the more. And you have to keep that pressure on. Otherwise, you relax the pressure for a second and then ping, the spring pops up, right? That's what humanity's spirit's like. And then Cliff said to me, no, Vinny, use an organic example. Humanity's more like a water spring. Now, what happens when you try to push down water that's bursting its way through to the surface? It starts going
its way out
sideways, you know. It goes through mud and through sand and through stone, and then it bursts through to the surface anyway, but this time from places that you couldn't predict or comprehend. That's what humanity's spirit is actually truly like. The more you push us down, the more we resist in diverse, interesting ways. Which reminds me, yesterday I went to Shooter's Bar, and Shooter's Bar in Auckland here has hosted freedom parties when the lockdowns were happening, and people required passports to get into bars and things like that, and they were like, no, we're not doing that. And been raided by the cops many times, and been a stalwart supporter and venue for the local New Zealand freedom movement here. And they had a fundraiser for Free NZ Media and for Counterspin Media. Now, I'd been doing this for, since 2007, 2008, thereabouts. And these guys started in maybe 2021, 2022, something of that nature. And they've already well surpassed anything that I've ever done. And in my opinion, part of the large reason for that is because of their production value. And the entire reason for their production value was because of one man, Jonathan Clark for Free NZ Media, and one other man, Justin, for Counterspin Media. These guys have the tech skills, right? And they do so much work all the time behind the scenes, and barely anybody sees them doing it, knows how hard they have to work, and they often don't appreciate that the great alternative media that Counterspin and Free NZ Media produce on a regular basis is due almost exclusively to the work of these guys, who largely go unrecognised. So I think over the last, 16, 17 years of my radio show, I've burnt out a number of keyboards, like quite a few. In fact, and so I nailed them to a piece of wood, and engraved the piece of wood with the Exposing Scumbaggery Awards 2024 for Counterspin Media and Free NZ Media, respectively. And I got up on the mic and awarded these two plaques to Justin and Jono, just as my contribution to the fundraiser, because let's face facts here, man. everybody needs recognition, right? And it's not like it's not an ego thing. It's just if you do something nice for somebody, you should say thank you. You know, that's on you. Sort of thing, and I just wanted to thank them in my own way. I spent a lot of time making those awards for them, and those keyboards there, they were part of the production of maybe 1,000 videos a pop during the time that I was using them. So yeah, there's a little bit of history there for it, and I think paying respect and showing care for those people who do the background work, not unlike yourself as well, Michael. And I want to thank you as well for helping me in the background, getting onto this network and doing all this stuff, man. I couldn't have done it without you.
Well, you're welcome. It's one of those things that we try to do here with Aftermath. Like Rob's really instilled it in me, especially to like just try and give the best service I can. Doesn't matter if it's a customer, a host, or whoever, just to help them out. And it also, through my customer service background, like with working in bakeries and things like that, dealing with customers, I've learned a lot of stuff to deal with that kind of thing, like people management skills and things like that, which I never thought I would have to use in a setting outside of the bakery, but it's come in handy for me doing tech support and stuff. So yeah, well, and it's appreciated to hear like the thank yous and stuff like that, because we don't get them enough. And I would like to thank you for being part of Aftermath, because man, I started following you, I think probably around 2009, 2010 in there. And then I noticed when you were let go from the last station you were with that you had a post on social media there that you were looking for a new home. So I kind of went and mentioned to Ron that like, hey, Vinny Eastwood's looking for a spot. You should contact him. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling there. So I'm glad that you were able to join us.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that too, bro, because I think it was... I love the American talk radio networks more than I love probably any radio networks in the world. I think at this point there's a real power in the American talk radio freedom unit, so to speak. But what's problematic is aging. Okay, the older you get, the more challenges there are to keep up with things, to keep your energy levels high and that sort of thing. And I believe, and I don't want to insult any of the talk radio show hosts of other networks or this one, but that you get to the point where you are now an elder and you now have the knowledge to share, and now maybe instead of working to keep doing your own thing is not the best use of your time. Maybe working to help the new generation, those who are younger, those who've got potential and that sort of thing. Maybe that's a better use of our time as talk radio show hosts as we get older, is to foster new talent.
That is my thought as well. There's a ton of talented younger folks coming up. They're not buying a lot of this stuff that they're being taught in schools. They're starting to push back against it, and I think it's time we give those younger voices a chance to be heard, because in their world right now, if you're slightly conservative and you're a Zoomer, your voice is very limited as to the reach that it can get. And yeah, I agree. We need a few more younger people. Like we have one younger lady, Laura Lavender. She's awesome. Her show is great, and it's a start. Even Ryan Gable, he's a little younger than most of the guys on the network, and like he's been doing it for years still, and he's like getting to be one of those elder statesmen. And yeah, like we need to get more of these younger voices out there, because like, oh man, there's so many of them, and like I said, they're not getting heard.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about that. You know, what are we supposed to do, Vinny? And how can we solve this problem? And just like, well, guys, traditionally, the problems of the world were solved largely, or at least kept in check, by something called the Fourth Estate, a free press. Anybody could say anything about anybody so long as they could back that shit up. All right?
Yeah.
And that is no longer the case. As soon as you destroy the freedom of the press, the rest of society will be destroyed very soon after, in my opinion.
Well, just look at what happened in Russia during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s when the communists were hardcore running things. It was basically the only information in the news was what the government allowed to be printed in the news. And that's basically where we're going now. Like in Canada here, all of our mainstream media, like our three big mainstream media channels, CTV, CBC, and Global, are all bought and paid for by the government. Like the CBC just got $1.4 billion from the government to fund its programming this year. So are they really going to print a story about Justin Trudeau and how negative his policies have been on the country? No, they're going to suck up and say it's so great because we just got this $1.4 billion from the government. Even though we're tanking, we can still pay our executives big fat bonuses.
Yeah, and in New Zealand, in June of this year, NewsHub, which is the largest private media company in the country, is having its doors shut. All right, as in an entire channel who every night you've got the 6 o'clock news on, that channel's not going to have a news program anymore because people ain't watching it. People ain't supporting it because it's too woke. It's too dull. It's too unoriginal.
Yeah, and that's the same for me. I've stopped watching a lot of the mainstream stuff because I went through this in the 90s as a Gen X kid. Like they tried pushing this they called it political correctness. It's not woke culture, but it was woke culture. Before it became woke culture, they just called it political correctness. Basically, they were trying to get everybody to censor what was coming out of their mouths before they said it. So it was basically thought policing, which is what's going on right now. Like you're not allowed to have independent thought. You have to follow what you're being fed. And I'm sorry, I can't do it. My brain won't allow me to think that way.
I mean, mine can do that, except it traumatizes me. Okay, and I remember what Yuri Bezmenov in the 1980s said about the Russian infiltration of the United States and communism, and he said that the effect on the Russian population, if somebody believed in freedom but they worked for a communist government, what happened was they had to psychologically prepare themselves as they got out the door in the morning. Yes, I'm a communist. Yes, I'm this, that, and the other. And then when they come home, they have to almost like take off their backpack, figuratively speaking, and put it down and try to remember that they believe in freedom. And what this happened is that a huge outbreak of schizophrenia was happening in the population, because you can't hold two contrary points of view in your mind. Even if you know one of them is a lie and you're just saying it anyway, that actually starts to cause mental illness in the population. Now, what's currently happening to mental illness statistics in the entire Western world that has mainstream media that is bought and paid for by the intel community, who are owned by the ultra-intergenerational wealth families? Are we seeing a lot of mental illness out there? Are we seeing a lot of suicides out there? Maybe it's because of the point of fact that people are being lied to, and there's part of them that knows that it's a lie and is punishing them psychologically for lying to themselves and saying that they believe it.
Cognitive dissonance is a wonderful tool if you want to break people's minds.
Yeah. Cognitive dissing Vince. So, I wonder, Mike, people ask me, is there a difference between New Zealand and America? Is there a difference between New Zealand and England? And it was just like, man, I remember that scene in Pulp Fiction where John Travolta's character, Vincent Vega, is explaining about the little differences in Holland. You know, like you can go into a movie theater and get a glass of beer, right? Or you can get a beer at McDonald's. And the little differences. You've got the same little things, but they're just a little bit different. And I think that's a similar thing with how you're dealing with any of these Five Eyes nations: US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, obviously. And these countries all have the exact same agenda, the exact same lines of propaganda to a large degree. How many times have you heard the word safe and effective? You know,
I've lost count on that one.
I mean, I rest my case. So it's a globalized propaganda system, and this goes back to, I believe, Operation Mockingbird, or precursor to it, the end of the JFK assassinations, where JFK's enemies were the ones heading the Warren Commission, who were investigating his assassination, which allegedly those people were indeed involved with, right? And the Central Intelligence Agency papers were leaked that said that anybody who does not believe the official narrative, and by the way, the official narrative is that John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed by magic. No, seriously, look it up. Magic bullet killed him. and the CIA sent round a memorandum to all of their assets in the mainstream media saying that if people don't believe that magic killed the president, they're crazy, okay? They're a conspiracy theory. Tell them that they wear tinfoil hats. Tell them that they need to get educated. Tell them that they're just not smart enough. Tell them that they've been drinking too much Kool-Aid. Tell them this, so on and so forth. This whole moniker of conspiracy theorist is still being used 60 plus years later, highly effectively, mind you, at making people fear speaking out against authority. And in my opinion, there's no such thing as authority. Like, it doesn't exist because it's not real. It has no substance. If people claim to be an expert, Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The kids nowadays seem to think that everything's a social construct. Well, the biggest social construct is government authority. It's because of the way we have our society set up and structured that we need these governments. I could go into like my anarchist and libertarian viewpoints, but
let's do that.
I think we could go with a libertarian kind of anarchist lifestyle, but we wouldn't be able to do it on mass country-size scales because it just doesn't work, because there's just too many individuals to make it work properly on such a large scale like that. But you could take it into a smaller scale community, like a town or something, kind of like a hippie commune kind of thing would be a good analog to it, I guess, and have like just trade and barter amongst the people in that area. One guy can grow grain, one guy can take that grain, make it into bread, another guy can make beer out of the barley or whatever. Trade and barter system instead of this like manufactured and created currency that we're using currently. It's all about debt bondage, and that's why that's why they're able to keep us in the situations we're in right now. We may not realize that we're in a form of debt slavery, but we are, and that's how they're able to keep it going, is through this cognitive dissonance and making it so that we have to follow these certain rules in society that people want. And I've always been the person who's like, as long as you're not hurting anybody, go do what you want. You want to wear dresses, wear dresses. You as long as you're an adult and you're not pushing your ideas onto people who shouldn't have those ideas pushed on them yet, do your own thing.
If I think somebody came up to me at a festival one time, and they were like, they seemed nervous talking to me, and they're like, that kind of thing. It's like, I'm worried about this. And I was like, did you hurt anybody? And they're like, no. Did you damage anybody's private property? No. Well, then you're not in trouble. Then just say whatever you got to say. You'll be all right.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people do that.
Me neither. I think it has a lot to do with the training that we've been through. Like I said, it started with Generation X in the 90s with the political correctness and making sure you don't make fun of people based on their religion or their race or whatever, But that's good. We should have respect for everybody. But at the same time, part of that respect is being able to make fun of those differences that we have, you know, like not in a negative way, but like in just a fun, jovial, you know, like this is the differences between this group and this group, you know, like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, I offended somebody the other day on my Facebook thread because I told a joke. What do you call a fast food drive-through in Saudi Arabia?
Don't know.
Burger King. All right, it's just a silly little joke, but somebody like takes it like way out of context, and they're like, oh, but you know, it's like, dude, come on, man, it's just a joke. I'm not trying to say in anything or whatever. It's just a shitty pun for F's sake, and. You know, people take themselves, especially religious people, take themselves far too freaking seriously. Because I was talking with a Kiwi DJ who was really big back here in the day, and he was saying that his problem with the truth movement, the anti-vax movement, and all of that kind of stuff, he actually had problems with it. Is that we're largely unable. And maybe it's not the majority, maybe it's just the few people here and there, unable to accept the possibility that we're wrong. All right? Now, when it comes to anarchy and no masters, no slaves, no, we're not wrong. We're 100% right. However, we should still always be open to the possibility and not act with such a rigid certainty sometimes. Or at least this was his argument. And now maybe there's a point to that, because on the one hand, you get a significant amount of people, like a very significant amount of people, who will hear or see one news article that supports the current way that they think, and this is our side of the fence too, and then without verifying whether or not there's actually any veracity to it, without investigating who actually wrote it, or you know, that kind of thing, they just share it and it goes viral, you know, 400,000 hits or something like that, and it turns out that it's complete BS operated by the CIA, and it's being shared by people in our movement who don't bother to do their fact checking. That's something that really pisses Mikey Havoc off. Yeah.
Well, that was something that I didn't want to really do during the whole pandemic thing, was post a bunch of anti-vax stuff and things like that, because one, I didn't really know a lot about the vaccines and stuff like that, what their possible things were. I didn't want to jump on a bandwagon and then have to go back and retract a whole bunch of statements or worry about having all my social media accounts locked down, that kind of stuff. So I avoided that kind of thing, mainly for that reason, because I couldn't verify the information that was on these little memes or in these articles and whatnot. So until I could get that verification, I didn't post nothing. That's just me. I don't want to disseminate wrong information. I've learned my lesson from the past from doing that.
It sounds very similar to Jan Irvin's from gnosticmedia.com. His thoughts is that if you do that, you can accidentally send mental viruses downstream. This is what he calls it. By telling people things that aren't actually true, that you haven't actually verified, using the trivium methodology, who, what, when, where, how, and why. Just like if you're trying to figure out, is that a 3D-dimensional object? Yes, it is. Why? Because you know it's got a top, down, left, right, depth, and front, you see. And this idea behind fact-checking has sort of become... I remember one time I was on a radio show. Oh my god, this is funny. These guys were claiming me some stuff. I can't remember exactly what it is. But I was trying to explain to them what real journalism is. Okay? And what you do is you get three people who have never met, who are all saying the exact same thing about the topic you're investigating. That you have to have at least those three before you can go off and claim anything as reasonably true enough to report on, right? And these guys interrupt me like, oh, no, that's mainstream media. And I was going, yes, but you're making one critical mistake. And they go, oh, yeah, what's that? You assume that the mainstream media practices journalism.
Well, when you can cite the same source out of 15 articles and it all leads back to the same originating source, chances are that's a story that's being fed to you for nefarious reasons.
Yeah.
When you're not getting independent verification from several different sources on that thing, even though you got 15 different outlets promoting that story, does not mean that story's right, because when you source out who came up with that story, and there's not like five things on AP, like Associated Press and Reuters and all the other fact gathering, news gathering resources that are available to people out there. If you can't independently verify through those, then chances are that story is not legit, and you should avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, because you're getting infected, all right? And I think, you know how there's the morphic field, right? There's that layer of reality above the 3D where we live. That's where all the thoughts go, and they're all accumulating, and you can pull stuff down from it as well, and it affects people in a sort of passive manner. So the more mental illness there is in society, the more chance there is for you to actually download that, the more misinformation and disinformation. I love it how they've weaponized these terms, which they themselves are the originators of. You know, it's just like, for example, the CIA has a disinformation program. Okay, it's official. The director of the CIA once said that once our disinformation program is complete, everything the people of the United States will believe will be the exact opposite of the truth. And now they go around saying that we're the spreaders of disinformation, when they are literally, on record, the creators and progenitors of the entire model and methodology behind spreading disinformation in terms of psych warfare.
Well, they just took Bernays' mixing of psychology and advertising and ran with it. Because that's basically what became MK Ultra, was how Bernays mixed advertising and subliminal messaging in with psychology to sell things to people.
Yeah, and people don't realize this, you know. They think Bernays is some kind of a salad dressing.
Yeah, or something you put on Eggs Benedict.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really the person who's basically designed the media model that's being used in modern society right now. It was all like, his uncle was Sigmund Freud, and he was really, really big into his uncle's friend Carl Jung's psychological work. So he mixed a little bit of Jungianism and Freudianism together to come up with his way of selling stuff, and it worked. He made it so that cigarette sales improved double within a couple of weeks by marketing cigarettes to women as torches of freedom.
Mm-hmm. You just got to get the right people involved, right? For example, the leaders in society. If you can recruit them and get them to start shilling your BS instead of the truth, your BS will become far more successful than the truth ever could. And
look at the WEF.
People have to be recognized for that. And at the time, smoking was very much not seen as a female thing to do. And also, so Bernays picked up on the fact that, hey, there's a women's rights movement. How can we exploit the hell out of that? We'll get some debutantes and some young up-and-coming women to march in the street and smoke cigarettes in front of everybody.
Yeah, and it was gangbusters. That was one of the most successful campaigns ever. Another one, Rockefeller challenged him to sell an overglut of pork bellies that he had. So he came up with the working man's American breakfast. 3 eggs, 3 slices of bacon, hash browns, and toast. Boom, there you go. Pork belly sold like hotcakes.
Mm-hmm. And pork belly was considered a waste product. It used to just get thrown away. But they're like, okay, well, why don't we just get rid of this stuff by feeding it to the population? Not entirely dissimilar from how the phosphate fertilizer industry gets rid of the highly toxic fluoride compounds by dumping it into the water supply.
Exactly. And you look at it, that's pork belly is probably the biggest contributor to nitrates in the human diet.
What does that mean? What do nitrates really do to you?
From what I understand, that they're a precursor ingredient to cancer-causing stuff. So, like the buildup of nitrates will create an environment that's more susceptible to cancer, something like that. I think that's how it was explained to me.
Well, they say cancer can't grow in an alkaline environment, so I'd act under the assumption that nitrate would be acidic in nature. It makes you have a toxic body, and therefore the cancer's like, hey guys, we're actually able to move in here now. They've cleared out all the riffraff.
They've opened it up for us. Come on, let's go.
Oh man, speaking of which, and another thing, I'm very concerned and afraid to talk about immigration now, and the amount of people who are followers of Islam from non-Western countries that are coming in. We're a country of 5 million people, and we're getting like over 100,000 of these people coming into our country every year. Right?
You guys are on par with Canada. We have 40 million people, and we've had 1 million people, upwards to 1.5 million people since 2020 come into Canada under Justin Trudeau's new rules.
It's out of control, and the mate, actually, I misspeak. It's totally in control, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, in the eyes of the government, it's exactly what we need in these countries because of our declining birth rates. Well, maybe if they didn't have such oppressive policies in these countries, people would start thinking of maybe starting families. Like, I don't know what the housing prices are like in New Zealand, but here, anybody who isn't from a wealthy family who's able to give them $100K for a down payment, or is willing to work and save their money to get that down payment, they're basically priced out of housing here in Canada, like purchasing a house.
And that's what I don't understand as well, because when people migrate to Canada and New Zealand, aren't they in the same boat as the rest of us? How can they afford to have 8 Muslim children when I as a Pākehā New Zealand male, can sometimes have to make a choice between whether or not you house your children or feed them? How is that even working? I don't even understand.
Well, then you get policies like we have here in Canada, which is a carbon tax. I'm sure that's part of the reason why they came up with this carbon tax, is because they had to figure out a way to get the funds somehow to cover all this stuff. And like in April, our carbon tax is going to quadruple. So it's going to go from like 16 cents a liter to 4 times 16 cents a liter.
Yeah, they're talking about putting an Auckland city fuel tax specifically for us. In addition to that, so let's look at it this way. If you've got the ability to destabilize countries, and I think this happened back in the day in the United States, where you didn't want to hire the local population in order to suppress the local population because they were born there, they're loyal to it, and that kind of thing. So what you do is you hire foreign mercenaries. That's what the British did. And now I think we've got kind of a passive methodology here by, let's say, for instance, the English-speaking, freedom-loving New Zealand community decided that they would start a political campaign for a freedom party and try and communicate it with as many people as you can. In a country where between 30 and 40% don't actually speak English properly.
Yeah, that'd be kind of tricky to do.
Mm-hmm. And so, who gets the votes? Whoever is paying the immigrants, basically. They come in and they're being given assisted living payments and things like that. I don't know the exact methodology of it. All I know is the effect of it is when I walk around, say, for example, we were in St. Luke's Mall near the centre of the city yesterday, and I think maybe I felt like I was a minority, like a real minority, and that was strange to me, and I don't know why it makes me feel uncomfortable specifically. All I know is that it does a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's getting to be like that here too. Traditionally, where I live, the city I live in, Saskatoon, has been like predominantly like 90% white. In the last probably about 10 years or so, we've gone down to about 80% white, and it's getting lower and lower each passing year here. Nothing wrong with that. Like a lot of the people who've come here have brought like wonderful food and stuff with them, which is awesome. I love that kind of stuff. And I love learning about other cultures, which is another thing which has been really awesome about the immigration coming here. It's just, I think Justin Trudeau, when he put his policy in of just taking anybody, he kind of rushed it and didn't really think it through and set up any infrastructure for it. He just opened the floodgates because he figured Canada could just cope. And that's how he seems to think everything runs. Like balance, or budgets will balance themselves. You don't need to balance the budget. You don't need to actually put the work into balancing the budget. The money will just magically appear and make sure that like everything's good. Like this is the man's ideology. I don't look at numbers for financial things. I just look at people. It's
just I think it's platitudes, right? They hire these front men to come out and psychologically whip people up so that they will accept any plausible agenda, an agenda that's been set long before this platitude purporting scumbaggery politician came into existence, right? I remember, what was his name? David Icke talking to me and the audience at the Logan Campbell Centre in 2014 about Dr. David Day in 1962, I believe, who turned whistleblower and tried to leak information about what the elite's plan for the world was in 1962. And he said that they're going to flood the West with quote-unquote Arab human garbage and people from nations. Because here's the thing. Whenever somebody is asked, for example, what do you like about the immigration? And the first thing that people say is the food. The first thing I say is the telemarketers. And but
everybody's got to do those jobs, right?
But let's say, what is the benefits to Western immigration? Okay, we've got somebody who comes in here who believes in freedom of speech. You've got somebody who believes in freedom of religion. We've got somebody who believes in freedom of the press. And they're coming into our country. They're immigrating into our country. What kind of damage are they going to cause to it? Whereas if you've got somebody from a country who does not believe in freedom of religion, does not believe in freedom of speech, does not believe in freedom of the press, threatens with murder anybody who questions their religion, what kind of damage to society are they going to do? You see, if somebody's raised in a particular manner, generally speaking, there's a large possibility that that person is not going to change their tune just because they now have a different address that they reside at.
Yeah, well, you can see what happened in certain parts of Europe with that kind of policy.
Can you explain that just a moment for people, those who don't know?
Well, I don't know if it's been debunked in the past year or not, but I've seen a lot of contradicting information on it with the Swedish no-go zones. Like there's supposedly places in Sweden where white Christians aren't welcome. They can't go there, and that only started happening after they started getting mass Muslim migration into their country due to the European Union's new migrant migration policies. Basically allowing free reign to anybody who's claiming asylum to go into Europe.
No questions asked. Come here, you've got a home, right?
I'm just waiting for the time that the halal police start going around in Germany telling the beer places they have to shut down.
Yeah, I called up my local Turkish butcher one time. He picks up the phone, he goes, hello? But I wonder as well, because if you're trying to start a religious war, okay, and it's all in the hadiths, which is actually 60% of the real written text in Islam. The Quran's only about 20% or something like that. So if somebody says they follow the Holy Quran, they're not following Islam. They're following a sliver of it, okay? Mm-hmm. And the rest of it's all contained in these books called the hadiths, which are far more extreme. And there's people who believe in that stuff so blindly that they will do things like suicide bombings and rape white women because they believe that's their right, and this whole idea of invasion of your enemy territory, you have this philosophy in the Hadiths that says, by the sword or by the womb, we will conquer you. So it's either we're going to invade you and kill you all, and then we win, or we're going to invade you, breed out of control so that we outnumber you, and then kill you all, and then we're going to win. Right? It's the only two ways that they really want to go about it. And I'm like, you can't negotiate with a people like that, bro. Stop allowing 100,000 of them into a freaking country with 5 million people every year. I mean, am I speaking a foreign language here? Am I speaking English in New Zealand? Like, it's not even the official language here anymore. I'm starting to get almost panicky about this. Like, I'm actually starting to get really upset and freaked out. And I think a lot of the women in my country are starting to get freaked out by this too, because Islam doesn't respect women as much as they might prefer. They don't want to just be turned into constant baby-making machines that have to go round and have all these rules that they have to follow when nobody can even see their hair, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what makes me laugh about the modern fourth wave feminists. Like, they're sitting here in the West complaining about being oppressed when they're not oppressed, and it's like, well, why don't you guys go over to, like, say, Saudi Arabia and try getting the women's rights over there, or go to Iran, or go to Iraq, or go to the ISIS caliphate and see if you can protest and get your fundamental rights for women in those countries, and then come back to North America and tell me how oppressed you are.
Yeah. It's like the comedian Steve Hughes talked about. He says, you've got these women and they're sitting in their homes that men built, and they're driving their cars that men built on roads that men built, talking about how oppressive men are and how unfair everything is on them. And he's just saying that these women are just really ungrateful. And I think I saw a bit with Rebecca sent me this link with Alex Jones talking with some guy, I forget who he was. And they had this idea that men and women are actually on the same team, and we always have been, because you can't be human without being either a man or a woman. And so when you talk about the human race, you talk about both of them, and they're always together, and they're always working for one another. And without them working together, the human race goes frickin' extinct, right? It's pretty straightforward, actually, when you think about it. And people are getting themselves into all these new little tizzies and things like that. It's because they're mentally ill, because they're accepting lies and empty platitudes as the truth of the situation, when they clearly are not the truth of the situation.
Well, that's exactly it. They're falling for what we were talking about earlier with mind viruses, the woke mind virus. It's a great example of a mind virus that's gone through all of society and pretty much infected over 90% of it.
Is it a cancer? Because cancer grows infinitely, it is said, if the host didn't die, right?
Yeah, as long as it has something to feed off of, that cancer can keep growing. Those cells will keep dividing and multiplying.
Right, and we're talking about a psychological cancer here, okay? So I think there's a couple of interlays here. So if you take political Islam out of the picture, and you just look at the brass tacks of just human psychology, the basic human psychology for a moment. Who loves being enslaved? Nobody. Who loves being told what to do? Nobody. So you have to convince them through one method or another that those being enslaved and being told what to do is a good thing. How do you, and that's what religion, I think, was originally created for in the first place, because back in the day you had very unevolved people who were very violent, very dangerous, and you needed religion at that time in order to psychologically control them so that they would think, oh, murder's bad, stealing other people's stuff is bad, so that you could prevent them from simply acting like animals. And I believe that that has actually been relatively successful in the Islamic world to a large degree in actually keeping order in those societies with the people that they've got there. However, when it comes to comparison, so if you're like, okay, I'm living in the West, and I've got XYZ freedoms, and then I want to go on holiday to Saudi Arabia where I don't have XYZ freedoms and just experience what it's like. That's entirely different to Saudi Arabia is moving into my country and taking away XYZ freedoms, all right? That's when people start getting really pissed off, and that's when you need disinformation and Islamophobia and homophobia and transphobia and all of these made-up phobias. It's just like a phobia is an irrational fear. Now, nobody with any real murk of history, perhaps back to the time of Suleiman the Magnificent, would ever agree the Western world has no threat posed to it by the followers of Islam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You would have to be kind of blind to see like the way that they look at anything outside of the scope of their own religion is not a beneficial thing. Like they look at anything that is not Islam or Muslim as haram and meant to be destroyed, because like the only true religion is Islam. Mm-hmm.
Nobody else is right. I'm the only one who's right. Okay, that sounds like some mental illness there, buddy. And
and this is what gets me. It's the Abrahamic faiths are the only religion that says we are the only true religion. Like Judaism claims it's the only true religion, Christianity claims it's the only true religion, and Islam claims it's the only true religion. Then you got like the Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Hinduism and to an extent Sikhism, where they don't say their religion's the only religion. They say their religion is one of the ways to achieve enlightenment.
Yeah, and maybe... is there a healing aspect to this idea that I believe, what was it, a guy, he was talking about the PCR test and how it gives these results that are remarkably in the positive all the time for some reason. And he said it's kind of like they're enhancing what is there in everything, and they're enhancing it enough so that to the point where it's detectable. And he said it related back to the Buddhist concept that there's a little bit of everything in everything else. Okay, and I remember one time somebody was saying, "Vinny, you don't know the truth, the one truth," and it was like I never actually heard anybody say at that point the one truth. What is the one truth? So it was like going into Google, and you know what I found? I found a huge long list of religions, all claiming to have the one truth, and all disagreeing about what that one truth is, and saying that every other religion is a bunch of effing liars. Okay, that's what you get if you look for the one truth. It's like no, there's the truth, facts. Objective facts. You know that you're looking at a scumbag because of a scumbaggery, and it's just like, well, how did you prove a scumbaggery? Well, he was a scumbag to this person, that person. He killed that and destroyed that and freaking ripped off that, that kind of thing. You're dealing with scumbaggery. Oh, okay, cool. So now we can actually make a real progress here. We can actually do something because we're dealing with reality again. If people are not dealing with reality, if they're trying to escape it perpetually, don't be surprised when the house made of cards that they've been spending their lives constructing suddenly comes tumbling down in a spectacular fashion. That's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, I've experienced that kind of thing myself as an addict, and hitting rock bottom. That you learn a lot about yourself when you do that. If you hit rock bottom correctly. I think there's ways to do it right and there's ways to do it wrong. I like to think I was lucky and I hit rock bottom correctly, and it made me totally reassess my life situation and helped me get out of it. But that's the thing. A lot of people nowadays, they if they are into the religion thing, they grasp that as like their one true saving thing, and as long as that they're able to confess their sins before their death, that they can get away with whatever and they have no consequences in the afterlife. That I think that's why people do what they do, is because we still have that innate fear of the unknown in our human psyche. That's just part of our reptilian brains. It'll never go away. And part of that is the fear of death. And as long as people can have that little bit of a safety net going, it doesn't matter, as long as I accept Jesus before I die, all is good.
Yeah. I don't have to work my life real hard, be doing good all the time and try not to break the rules and what have you. I can just admit it, Hey, I admit it. I was a rapist and a murderer and so on and so forth, and now I'm forgiven. Fantastic. Didn't have to make any effort, didn't have to make no reparations. I just paid the priest the money and gave him a child or two to rape in the back rooms, and suddenly all my sins were forgiven.
Exactly. And that's what kind of drew me to Gnosticism. Like, I started looking into like the whole Gnostic idea of how religion is, and for the Gnostics, religion isn't really like the church thing, all that. Like most Gnostics believe, like especially Gnostic Christians, that Jesus resides within you. You don't need to go to a physical building to worship Jesus. You don't need a priest to interpret your words to Jesus. You're able to commune with Jesus on your own, or whoever the higher power being is that you choose to believe in. And it basically, the way Gnostics look at stuff is it gives you more of your own agency to decide your fate, while making it so that they give you suggestions on how to live your life, but you don't necessarily have to do it. And it's more for the enlightenment of yourself and the betterment of yourself, hence becoming a god idea of Gnostics. It's basically like to gain that enlightenment. It's basically the Buddhist version of the Abrahamic religions.
I think, what was it? They also invented lots of things, because when you're dealing with reality, like just like a physicist would, you're able to deal with physical reality, and you're able to find out its rules, and you're able to make new things. This is how the Gnostics created the Gnostic frying pan, and we have this thing about accidental discovery. For example, Teflon, which was developed by NASA. They were trying to create something that would allow the spaceship to go up into the atmosphere and get through all of that stuff. And then they found that it just melted away and then turned into this toxic crap and what have you. So they got really frustrated, and then they threw something at it and it just slid right across it. And they're like, whoa, it's very slippery. Let's put that into frying pans so that it completely dissolves in all of people's food and poisons them that way.
Well, it's like the heat shield that they use on this, or they used on the space shuttles. The guy who developed that was an accident. He was a hairdresser trying to invent a new hairspray that had better hold and a stronger hold, and he came up with this stuff that like doesn't burn. Like I watched way back in the day when he was on Oprah talking about his discovery, and he was like taking like a blowtorch and showing like full on flame of the blowtorch right onto this piece of tile that he created. No burns, nothing, not even a scorch mark from the gases burning off. You know how like when you got like a butane lighter or whatever and you get that black streak from the carbon? Yeah, there's none of that on that tile at all. And it was an accident because he was making hairspray.
Wow. So what are the accidental discoveries that the truth movement are making here, and where can we have some kind of progress? We've gone a little bit over time here, but I know that that's all right, because we're having a great conversation, and if we're having fun, the audience is having fun too. And
totally.
If everybody's on that wavelength, the network will be like, keep going, guys. So I wanted to actually make a little bit of a trip into the comments section. I might actually I'm still sharing my screen with you. I didn't realize that the whole time. Excellent. Louise Rogers says, so on point, Vinny, on so much. big bosses get it together, G. We've got Amos777 in the chat room as well. Lovely man. And Andrea too. Lovely to see you. Days, haven't seen you before, nor have I seen Dead in the Water or Matthew Reynolds or Andy PG. We've got 19 concurrent viewers. It's nearly twice what we normally get. I think it was because how many of you in the chat room are from who were those guys? Rise Above. Yeah, I was on the Rise Above podcast the other day, and they sent well over 100 subscribers my way and took me over the 1,000 subscriber mark, which was absolutely fantastic and lovely of them. And I think it was also they really appreciated me on the show, and I really appreciated being invited on and that kind of thing. It sort of like becomes like a big love in when you've got the right kind of truther people, all right, specifically the right kind, because there's so many people in this movement who you have to admit they're bad people, okay?
I've come across a few of them. The Jacques Fresco was probably one of the worst people I've ever met.
Whoa, real?
Yeah.
Man, guys who were like devoted to him back in the day of the Zeitgeist movement.
Yeah, that I got involved in that. I was like the head of the Saskatoon Zeitgeist chapter, and I got in on a couple of calls, and it was when they started pushing the Venus Project. And I started questioning their whole governmental system on the Venus Project. It's basically neo-feudalism with the heads of science in charge instead of the feudal overlords.
Yeah. And people don't like it when you question their life's work, eh?
No, especially when you start putting it on them that, like, well, you're just basically making it so you're going back 100 or 500 years into the past for the way things are set up. So basically what you're telling me here is if I'm a firefighter, then all my children after me and my grandchildren and great-great-great-grandkids are going to be firefighters, and they have no chance to improve their lot in society under your rules. And he was basically, that's the only way we can make it so that humanity can come together and work the way it should work. And I'm like, no, there's better ways than forcing feudalism again.
Yeah. All right. So basically, for a quick sum up for those of you who are unaware, there's a thing called anarchy, which has been turned into this word that means chaos. And it doesn't actually mean that. What it means is no masters, no slaves, no rulers is the specific definition of it. Do you want a ruler? No. Well, then you're an anarchist. Get over it. Okay? Do you want to be somebody's property? No? Then you're an anarchist. Get over it. There were lots of Christians back in the day who were speaking out against tyranny, and people would ask, are you a Christian? They'd be like, no, I'm not, or whatever, and the tyranny continued, because the people aren't willing to stand up and identify themselves and what they really are, and how they actually stand against scumbaggery.
Speaking of Christians and Christian sects, one of the biggest groups of anarchists to ever come out of the United States were the Quakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a friend actually who's a bit of a Quaker, and she, oh my goodness, I was just remembering the look on her face. She says that her belief is that everybody's basically a good person, and that if you just are nice enough to them and have the right conversation with them, they'll all start doing good again.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work that way. But yeah. I'm going more for like how they structure their society and stuff. It's based on trade and barter, and it's like people are their own person, that they're responsible for themselves kind of thing, which is basically what anarchy is.
Precisely, anarcho-syndicalism, as it were. The problem is, I think there's really only one problem with it, because all the models where it's actually been tried, there was a small village in Mexico that kicked out all the politicians and did all their stuff, and every statistic of human existence basically went through the roof. It was like, great. And then, of course, the government came in with the military and took them out. And then, of course, there was the Spanish anarcho-syndicalist society, which were doing great for everybody. everybody on every metric, and then the military came on and took them out. All right, the only difference between successful anarchy and unsuccessful anarchy is successful anarchy realizes that there's people out there who aren't anarchists, who actually want to sow chaos and are willing to break the rules that God has made on this plane of existence in order to kill and enslave you. And unless you are willing to kill them, not murder them, not be violent, but kill them. If they try to murder you, then they are going to beat you and they are going to enslave and subsequently exterminate you. That's the very basis, like that's where the rubber meets the road. Like in Starship Troopers, force is violence, the supreme authority from which all other authority is derived. And if you are unwilling to deal with that reality, that he who has the gun makes the rules, know that that is not right, that might is not right, but people still believe it, and you need to be able to physically defend yourself against physical attacks. This is what martial arts, Aikido, and all of these other methodologies are really about, is that no, I'm not going out there to kill people, hurt people, enslave people and stuff like that, but I know that other people do, and I must defend myself against them and be prepared just in case.
Buddhist monks invented Kung Fu as a method of self-defense against the ruling monarchies at the time in China to defend their right to believe their religion.
I did not know that, but it totally proves my point.
Yeah. Well, hey, yeah, that's where the monks developed their combat system, or why they developed their combat system was to defend themselves from a monarchy that was trying to impose imperialistic ideals of religion upon the people.
We just came to a great head there in this show. Mike, it has actually been a profound pleasure and an honor to have you on today, and I really appreciate you, man.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. It was a fun conversation, and we'll have to do this again for sure. Maybe talk a little bit more about what's like the similarities in some of the crazy laws between Canada and New Zealand, because I know we got a lot of very similar suppressive speech laws in both countries.
Well, I was thinking as well, it would be great to have a round table, me from New Zealand, somebody from Australia, you from Canada, and somebody from America, and somebody from the UK. That would be good. And we have a list of discussion points, like let's go through immigration, what's happening in each of our countries. Let's go through psychological warfare on the population, or propaganda, or something like that, and we can actually compare notes. Because I think that's the reason why we're so fractured and divided is that we don't talk to each other enough. The other day what did I do? I made maybe half a dozen phone calls to people for no reason than just to have a conversation with them, you know?
Oh, hey.
I just... Somebody told me that people don't do that often enough, and I was like, you know what, you're right, and maybe there's something wrong with that. Maybe the way that I've been conducting my communication with everybody, like, hey Mike, I want to talk to you. Oh yeah, why do you want to talk to me? Because I want to get you on the show. Oh yeah, I'll come on the show. Okay, great, that's the end of our conversation. You see?
Yeah.
Right? We're not actually just saying, hey Mike, how are you? What's been happening? You know, that kind of thing. And that's what this show, I think, has really tried to differentiate itself from the bulk of other broadcasters out there who are talking about the news or talking about all of these things, is it's not personal. It's not a conversation. It's an interview. Right, and I'm not criticizing anybody. Those roles are absolutely important. Yeah, people need critical information and fact-based evidence and things of that nature, but they also need to have fun. They also need to feel love and joy and hope.
Yeah, well, that's why Rob kind of suggested doing everybody on the network goes on everybody's show, because like. It shows that we can all work together. We can function as a unit, and by doing so, that helps ferment change. You know, like you start getting a solid message going out from a group of people, and that's the kinds of stuff that ends up picking up steam and becomes a grassroots movement. Just look at the truckers' strike protest here in Canada in 2022. It was a small grassroots movement started by 2 people. And next thing you know, it exploded into this giant worldwide event. In fact, right now in Europe, with the farmers in Europe, they took over that protest after the Canadian government shut down the one here. And they stepped it up a notch.
No kidding. Well,
like manure spreading all over the capital cities, man. Like that's telling people they're fed up with the BS.
Well, I was wondering about this because those things are in terms of public display. And Penny Bright, God rest her soul, 40-year activist in New Zealand. She mentored me. I think I did over 100 videos with her while she was still alive. And I think and I got paid $300 to live stream her funeral for her. And I think that was the only money I ever got out of her. But the other things that I got from her was her power. She had incredible strength. Her knowledge. She had so much experience and just basically data that you couldn't just find. You know, when you Google something, it's very, very different to somebody knowing what they're looking for and trying to remember something that they already know and then give you the source. It's completely different to you're just discovering this all for the first time and you're just wandering around in Wonderland, like the vast majority of people in the truth movement. People in the truth movement, especially the newly post-Soviet Union awakening, are children, right? Psychologically, intellectually speaking, and I'm not getting on no high horse or anything here. I'm just telling you the facts. The vast majority of people who claim to be part of the truth movement or claim to be awake are very, very low down the totem pole in terms of their working models in their heads of how things truly work and how to conduct themselves in this society. Number one, if you are basically naming names and going around causing fights with every other person in your movement, that is a bad idea. You haven't thought about the consequences of your actions, bro. Stop doing that. Because your country might be big, your country might be small, but your truth movement is micro. And you will bump into these people, and these people have opinions, and those opinions will circulate round, and before you know it, everybody who's your friend will get tarred with the same brush as you if anybody sees you as somebody who's just going around attacking everybody in the truth movement, right? And we've got significant amounts of unresolved trauma. Okay, this is what Passio enlightened me about is about being raised. Okay, it's like your parents are supposed to raise you, as in raise your consciousness, raise your intellect, raise your level of knowledge, so that you can get out into the world and act in a mature and precise and adult manner. However, what's problematic about nowadays is because society's been destroyed to such a large degree, you've got so many boys growing up without their daddy, like me, and so few of them actually go out to seek father figures like I did. I had thousands of men who were smarter than me in some way, better than me in some way, more experienced than me in some way, had done things that I had not done and maybe will never be capable of doing. I had to actively seek mentorship from the wise and learned elders of the truth movement in order to raise myself up and raise my level of maturity. And I don't think that people realize that it takes 10,000 hours minimum for you to even have an inkling of what you're really talking about with regards to the hundreds and thousands of different topics that people can really discuss on shows like this.
Well, exactly it. You got to put your time in. It's just like any other thing you want to master. You have to put those 10,000 hours in. Because like I think they say after you put your 10,000 hours into any tasks or any job that you're learning or whatever, once you got your 10,000 in, you're the master of that or a master of that subject. You understand that subject at a point where you can explain it to people and develop your own things off of that subject.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the truth movement. You have to put your time in. Read books like The Secret Teachings for All Ages. Read books like, what's that one by Pike? Morals and Dogma. Read that kind of stuff, because it teaches you a lot of the things that the people that are using these things against us is where they got that information, is from these books that are 150, 200 years old, that have been around for a long time. Adolphus Levi is another great guy to read if you want to figure out what symbolism and stuff is that's plaguing the minds right now. Because you might not think it, that these symbols and stuff that you see from corporations, they affect your brain in ways that you'll never understand. And once you understand the language that these symbols are speaking, you can really start to understand what's going on. And the only way to learn that stuff is by reading. Another good place to start if you want to learn that stuff, Jim Mars. He's a master at explaining that stuff to people in a way that's like really easy to understand. And Jordan Maxwell. If you can get your hands on Jordan Maxwell stuff, he's another man who's like a treasure trove of information on these subjects. Like, you can learn so much from just reading these guys' books. Like, there's so much information out there. Read as much as you can. That's the one thing I can suggest to people who want to learn about this stuff, is read as much as you can. Source as many materials as you possibly can about this stuff.
Yeah. And I was thinking about the Bible the other day. And you know how it's got all these remarkably accurate things about society and how it's happening now and what have you. And then I had a look at Senecus and Marcus Aurelius, Stoic philosophers, who were telling people about things and how society was 2,000 years ago. And it's almost word for word kind of what's happening in the Bible that was happening 2,000 years ago and has happened almost every 100 years in some part of the world, in some part of society. And it gave me a realization that there's no actual wonderful revelations in the Bible that nobody could have predicted except through God, because humankind hasn't actually changed one iota in thousands of years since the writing of the Bible. And people understood completely, psychologically and spiritually, where people were at the time. And so they wrote a book with all their current knowledge and just say, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, because of course it does. We're human beings, right? And that way you can get people to believe that these people have some kind of mystical understanding, that it couldn't have possibly been written by the Romans, who understood psychology way better than you, so much more than you, that they're able to manipulate you into believing it so blindly that you believe that all other forms of knowledge are irrelevant. And instead of working together for a better tomorrow, you just work together to tell everybody that they're going to be saved. And that they have to just do everything a certain way. It's just, I can understand it because of addiction and trauma. How many people currently follow some form of Abrahamic religion who have previous trauma in their life or previous addiction problems, which are usually caused by unresolved trauma, and now, because you realize that drugs operate the same area of the brain when they're activated as religious experiences, now you realize why a lot of people who follow religion so blindly appear to be basically quasi-drug addicts, except their drug is now a propaganda produced by the Romans thousands of years ago in psych warfare of ancient, right?
Yeah.
Am I being too rash?
No, I don't think so. That's basically from the last 30 years of studying history and religion. That's the consensus I've come up with. It's like we've basically exchanged certain physical drugs for more spiritual drugs, because it was easier to obtain those spiritual drugs, i.e. religion, than it was for us to obtain the non-spiritual drugs. Right.
Kind of like how when somebody runs out of weed, they go, all right, I'm going to start meditating again.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, too, is like, when you look at how the the church actually pulled off, like the Catholic Church pulled off its total control and domination of Europe for 1,000+ years. It was amazing. They basically took a play from the Sumerian and Egyptian priest kings textbooks, which is basically don't let the masses learn how to read.
And nowadays, literacy is way down there, man. Like honestly, people just don't read. That was what Michael C. Rupert again coming back to. That was the very first documentary I ever saw. That was proper conspiracy theory back in the day. He said that you, and he was referring to you as the American people, don't read. And he reads out this quote from some high-level scumbaggery official who was getting away with a lot of crimes. And he was asked by a journalist, how come you're able to keep getting away with this? And he says, well, because the American public don't read. All right? It's just as simple as that. If you can prevent people from analysing reality, that is right there in front of them, that they cannot argue with, that they must accept, then basically you can do anything you want to them. I thought about this problem with the liver, and I went into my naturopath, and he said to me, Vinny, the liver's classified in toxicity from 1 to 3, 3 meaning very bad, and your liver is a 9. Like, whoa, okay, that's a bit of a problem. I might have to start doing something here. And that realization for me, from personal health benefits, you can sort of look in a vein and go, okay, hold on a second. What if this same realization about what's wrong with my health is a same realization that everybody needs to come to about what they believe in their selves, what they believe in their religions, what they believe in their economies, whatever the hell. And this world has so many, and particularly the audiences of shows like mine, so many really interesting people who are very highly skilled, and all of them have suffered. A lot of them are addicts and things like that because of that unresolved trauma, but they still try to work really hard to do good in all the ways that they can. It's like I said back in the day, the best thing that you can do in the truth movement, regardless of who you are, regardless of your age or your level of skill, is not nothing. Just don't do nothing. That's all we ask. If you believe that you need XYZ piece of technology and all your ducks in a row before you can start a live stream or a radio show, my answer is no. Have you got a cell phone? Yeah. Well, then you can start live streaming in the next 30 seconds, and if you don't, you're just being lazy. Okay?
Yeah. And some of the biggest Twitch streamers and TikTok streamers, that's all they use. They got a selfie stick and their cell phone, and that's it. That's how they produce their content.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes. And in fact, the first couple of podcasts I was on with Rob, I didn't have all my equipment yet. So I used my Samsung S2 cell phone to produce or to share video and audio with Rob so we could do a show. And it worked. Like that's all it takes. Like most people nowadays have a device in their pocket that they can do their own content with. And don't be afraid. Just get out there and do it.
Yeah.
Like if you got something to say, get online, post a little thing. Who knows? Maybe you'll gain traction and become internet famous, or get people out there that will start or change the way they think, just because of your little message. And that's all it takes. That's really all it is. It's just the grassroots movement is how we fix things. You don't fix it with big policy. You got to fix it at the small level first, and then let that idea bloom into the big level.
Yeah, exactly. And so many people have this trepidation, this fear that if they start telling the truth on a public platform, something really bad's going to happen to them, and the police are going to bust through the door and spray them in the face with pepper spray, and then force them to take some kind of poison through their arm or whatever the hell. It's just like, how many truth movement people has that really happened to, guys? Okay, how important?
Exactly.
How important do you really think you are? Okay, it's just like they don't actually come and get you in those methods until you actually become a threat. Okay, are you capable of, like, for example, Mike, are you capable, like, let's say tomorrow you decided, okay, we're pulling the pin and we are now taking over Canada. Could you do it by yourself? Nope. Vinny.
I would get laughed at off of Parliament Hill for that one. In fact, the one guy who's actually allowed to open carry in Canada is the guard at the monument of the unknown soldier, would probably shoot me before I even got anywhere near Parliament Hill.
All right, so rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, okay, you can't take back your country by yourself, and no more than I can, and therefore you're not a big enough threat for them to assassinate. Okay, and even if you were a reasonably sized threat, there's all these people who'll be like, "Oh, why hasn't David Icke been assassinated? Why not? Have you heard of a propaganda machine? Have you heard of demonization? Have you heard of psych warfare? All of these methodologies that you can use to demonize people and make them afraid to even so much as interact with David Icke or even speak to anybody at a party about the things David Icke has been telling them are the perfect way to kill him, because you can kill his ideas. You don't need to take the man out if all of his ideas have plausible deniability and a structure of things and everything. David Icke couldn't click his fingers and take over England tomorrow if he wanted. None of us have that power, and that's why none of us have been assassinated.
Yeah, it's... I forgot what I was going to say there, but it was, what was that? It was along what you were saying there. It was,
how big of a threat are we? How dangerous are we?
Oh, exactly. We're not a threat until you get to a point where you're like, somebody like here in Canada, Tamara Litch, who was the organizer of the Freedom Convoy, or a guy like David Icke, but not really, or Julian Assange. You're basically just under the radar for the most part, and unless you like suddenly blow up and do something incredibly big that does start to threaten the powers that be's power. In the case of Tamara Litch here, starting the truckers movement and basically shutting down North America for transportation of goods, yeah, they're going to do stuff. But like, unless you're on that scale, and that's a very rare thing. Like that, I gave 2 examples, and that's out of the last 10 years or 20 years, pretty much. 2 examples of people actually getting railroaded by their governments for being too big.
Yeah.
And in the last 30 years, too, the CIA's realized that character assassination is much more viable, easier to do, and much more profitable for the end means than actual assassination is. Because if they can get it so that people don't believe what the character is saying, they basically destroy all credibility of that person and make it so that anything that comes out of their mouths or from them is discredited before it even gains traction.
Yeah.
Whereas if they were to randomly just go kill somebody, that could change a lot of people's minds.
You could make a martyr and then have a real problem on your hands. Or
Exactly.
You could, instead of assassinating the person, just assassinate their character, and then you got no problem on your hands, eh?
Well, then you also get the jump on the bandwagon, pitchfork and fire mob on the internet going to call for your cancellation.
Yes, as happened to me, because I got too big. As happened to Billy TK, because he got too big. All right? So we know from experience what it is to become too big to be allowed to just continue unaccosted, right? It's just like, Vinny, right, you've been doing this for too long, and we didn't really worry about you in the past. But now that you've actually got a big political platform in 2020 and people are starting to know your name around the country and all your content is becoming actually dangerous and being viewed highly and what have you, now we can delete everything you've ever done.
Yeah, because now we can mask you as as a person who is disseminating false information, misinformation, disinformation, every other whatever little thing on there. They can tag you with every ism and phobia that they can think of and make it so that you're considered untouchable, and they hope that nobody will deal with you, which kind of blew up in their faces, because that just made it so that your popularity exploded even more, because people want to hear why all of a sudden this guy's being shut down and shut up. Why I want to hear what he has to say now.
I can assure you it's the exact opposite. My popularity, I think, I used to be getting, I don't know, a couple of hundred people watching the live streams at any one time, and a couple of thousand views within the week. And after deplatforming, everybody is like, "Oh my God, they deplatform Vinny. Let's give him maybe 2 views a show, maybe 150 by the end of the week, and stuff like that." And the audience never returned, never. Okay, so because at the time that I got deplatformed, a whole bunch of other people who'd never done a damn thing in the past couple of decades suddenly came out of the woodwork and said, oh, there is something wrong. Hey, everybody, I'm going to start fighting for freedom. And they're like, well, screw that Vinny Eastwood guy. Let's look at this new person who's got absolutely no experience, and frickin' like listen to them and their wonderful podcasts and things like that. And because I was banned off of everything, and then after being arrested, actually banned from accessing the internet itself, that was just like, I lost 97% of my audience as well as 100% of my content. It was just a brutal thing to realize that when you get disappeared, okay, nobody really cares. All right, nobody cares enough to really be able to do anything about it, and more to the point, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it even if they wanted to. I mean, what are you, the CEO of Google now, are you? Are you the CEO of YouTube? What, are you going to unban me? You're going to give me my life's work back to me, are you? No, you're not. You might subscribe by yourself to my YouTube channel, so that instead of having 18 viewers on a live stream, I might have 19, and that's the contribution that it may sound small, but the people who do listen to my show now, even after losing 65,000 subscribers, each and every one of them is now even more valuable to me than before, which is why I want to encourage people to go to my YouTube channel for Vinny and the Vendettas as well, because we have shockingly large amounts of songs on there, which I hope you might enjoy. And also, I had this this article that I wrote a little while ago in 2017. 3 main arguments of vaccine lobby debunked by Vinny Eastwood. All right. I'd been at this since long before anybody else was, and criticizing it in the way that was, I think, very poignant, long before anybody else was, before anybody even conceived that there was such a problem with Pfizer pharmaceuticals. I was just there doing it. And nowadays, you've got all the new people, God bless them. I just wish that they would at least pay some homage to those who have come before, in the same way that I have shown homage to people like G. Edward Griffin and Jordan Maxwell and David Icke and so on and so forth. James Corbett, Max Egan. Those guys have been doing this for a very long time, and some of them even longer than that. And unless you acknowledge those people who have really come before you, you don't really deserve the knowledge or the platform to a large degree, because you haven't been humble enough to realize that people have done what you've done before you, and that maybe their knowledge is perhaps useful to you. Maybe you should ask them for their help, their mentorship, something of that nature. That was like how my entire career was. It was always about me getting help and mentorship by providing a platform to other people who I thought were interesting, or people who just needed a platform because nobody would listen to them. That's how I got my education, not by coming out without knowing anything and telling everybody what I thought.
Yeah, same here. That's how I really got into things. I started listening to like certain podcasts, stuff like that, and then started getting into like the authors and stuff, like some of the podcast hosts like David Icke, who did their own books, things like that. I would go and read those, learn from them. Jordan Maxwell, I've read a bunch of his stuff. He's like brilliant. One of my favorite podcasters, Ryan Gable of The Secret Teachings, he learned a lot of his stuff from guys like Jordan Maxwell, things like that. And like all these guys that I follow and have listened to and have been following for years, they give the credit to the people who inspired them. And it's only right for those of us in the game nowadays to return that same gratification and thankfulness of being taken under somebody's wing and shown these things in the way that like maybe we were looking at it wrong, and they helped us like realize that like, hey, you know what, this is where you should be looking for this information. Don't go to this place, because like this place here is going to tell you like the fake BS stuff about the information. Here's how you disseminate how to tell what's real and what's not. Those are the people we have to like give thanks to and acknowledge all the work that they put in to get to the point where we could take all their combined knowledge and add it into our knowledge and then share all that stuff. Because like that's what it is. Like there's no original ideas in this world, in this realm anymore, in the truth realm, because there's so many people out there covering these topics that pretty much everything's been covered. So now it's time for us to give credit where credit's due and to accept the credit for the stuff that we have done. But first we got to give that credit to where it's due, because like it's important to recognize your elders. It's like you can't understand what's going to happen in the future if you don't pay attention to what happened in the past.
And more to the point, the reason why people are so uneducated and so bereft of knowledge is because those people who are educated and full of knowledge are not the people you're interested in talking to and learning from. All right?
Exactly.
The greatest mistake in history.
Yeah. Never listen to the teachers. Always go for the guy who's actually experienced it.
Mm-hmm. Mike, we've had a really much longer broadcast than usual today. It's a 60-minute show, and here we are at nearly hour number 2. So
kind of got carried away today.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've gone everywhere and talked about practically everything. We haven't touched on the fake alien invasion that might be coming. We haven't touched on chemtrails. We haven't touched on either. But it doesn't mean that we're avoiding those topics deliberately. I love those people in the comment sections. How come they're not mentioning this? Because this show's about this particular subject today. Maybe have you heard of an archive, bro? You know, have you heard of a Google search, bro? You know, I love the people who go like, Vinny's never mentioned Israel, he's never mentioned Palestine. Have you ever typed into a keyboard before? Hey? You know, it's just, people are stupid. They don't even think before they start accusing somebody of being a shill or whatever to back up what their suspicions are before going out and doing that. These mentally ill, narcissistic, sadistic, psychopathic, trolling pieces of filth. They're everywhere. And you know what Vinny Eastwood does to all of you before even finishing reading your comment. Block! And the scum is gone!
Yeah, some of the best advice I've ever been given was, if you're scrolling on social media and you see something you don't like, just scroll on by.
Yeah. And I wish people would do that with my show, you know. It's just like, oh, this guy's having fun while he's talking about very serious subjects. I'm a very serious person. I take myself very seriously. I find it very offensive, you know. It's just, don't tell me about it, bro. Just press the X, like in the tab, right up in the corner there, okay? And you can just get rid of Vinny Eastwood, and he'll be gone forever because he doesn't actually try to go and force himself on you.
Well, hey, and one of the best ways to learn about a subject, especially if you want to get an unbiased viewpoint of that subject, look at the humor associated with that subject. Because the humor will tell you more truth than anything else, because that's what humor is. And that's why it's funny, is because truth hurts, and when the truth hurts, it's funny.
Yeah, it's sort of like who was it? Thomas Sheridan The author of the Labyrinth of the Psychopath, puzzling people, Irishman, and he comes on the show and he's like, "Hey Vinny, have you ever seen a Charlie Sheen chemtrail?" It's like, "No, what's that?" And he goes like this. Just brilliant, right? And this is a guy who studies the deep horrific scumbaggery of psychopathing for a living, that kind of thing. So if he's got a sense of humor, if he doesn't take himself too seriously, then none of us got any excuse to, do we?
Exactly. Like you can't laugh at others until you're willing to laugh at yourself. That's the way I look at life. That's like my big philosophy. You know, I laugh at myself all the time because I do stupid, dumb things constantly. And I know if I was looking at myself from the outside, I would be laughing. So, me as well.
Yeah. I am stupid. I am dumb. But there's a hell of a lot of people way more stupid and more dumb than me.
Even if you're average, half the people under you are dumb. Dumber than you are.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole point about comparing yourself, right? And I remember Jordan Peterson was talking about this. He had a client in a psychological practice who was very depressed because he did not ever achieve as much as his college roommate in life. You know, and he's like, Peterson's like, "What are you talking about, bro? You've got an incredible job, you've got a great family, a beautiful missus, a nice place where you live, a decent car. You're a member of multiple community groups. You've got good standing and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, who was your college roommate?" And the guy goes, "Elon Musk." So if you're comparing yourself. All right, it's apples and oranges, man. We are not all born the same. We're not all born with the same gifts, and we're not all born to create the same art that changes the universe in our own unique little way, are we? Because otherwise everything would be remarkably boring, because everybody would be competing in the exact same areas in every way, as opposed to going, I wonder what stuff somebody else hasn't thought of or ever done before. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, well, everybody has a talent or a skill that they can profit off of. It just might take you a little bit longer to find yours, but everybody has the ability to do something that can provide them with either an income or stability in their life or whatever it is that they need. Everybody's got the ability to do that. You just got to be willing to take the chance on yourself to do so.
Yeah. Like, that's exactly what George Carlin said. Just take a fucking chance.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's too cowardly out there, man. It's like, look, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to get your character assassinated, you're going to lose all your friends, your family's going to hate you, and you're going to get bankrupted, and you're going to be on the street and then eventually beaten, raped, and murdered to death by the police. Okay, that's the worst thing that could happen to you, bro. Don't be a pussy. That's no excuse not to do it.
Exactly. And the chances of that actually happening are so low that, like, the worst that might happen is you might lose your job. Well, you know what? Find a marketable skill that you have and market it. Like, you can uncancel your canceled self. You're an example of it. You've uncanceled yourself. You're still working on getting the full uncancellation, but that's a bonus, man. You're working towards it. You didn't give up. You faced the adversity and fought through it. And stood up for yourself and said, "No, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Screw you guys. I'm going home."
That's the right thing to do. I think, and maybe this is the reason why I started doing what I was doing, is because I was traumatized by listening to too much Alex Jones. All right? And we've all been there, you know. And when I say too much Alex Jones, I mean too much Alex Jones. You ever listen to a 3-hour Alex Jones broadcast on repeat off of the iTunes player and stuff like that, bro?
Yeah. Or the 3-hour live broadcast off of the InfoWars channel, and then going to like the 7.5-hour broadcast on the YouTube channel before it got taken off, and just having that go all day. Oh yeah, I've been there. You
know, and you have this. I think psychosis that comes over you. Like I remember one time I was real broke and listening to too much Alex Jones, and my sister told me that maybe I should get a personal loan together or whatever, and I started screaming at her, "Why is everybody such a friggin' debt-bound slave?" You know, and the whole idea is you. Waking up to the truth is inherently traumatic in and of itself, but depending on who wakes you up, you may or may not be given the psychological skills to really cope with that knowledge. Okay? It's all very well thinking that the world is sunshine, rainbows, and sugar-coated cupcakes, but it is ignorant to believe that if you want to tell somebody the truth, that it is not going to make them suffer or experience stress and trauma as a result. Okay? Regardless of how funny it is, regardless of how heartfelt or enjoyable it is to listen to, the truth does take a toll on you. And I am sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if I've ever traumatized you by bringing on a guest you don't like, or talking about things that have triggered you, or something of that nature. That was not my intention. My intention is to not care what people think, to only care what people know.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And that's what I like about the network we have here, is like we're not really pushing ideas onto people. We're letting people take in the information and decide for themselves, which is what's needed more in the world. Like people got to slow down, stop and think. Like that's the problem with the modern world is we're at 1,000,000 miles an hour with no respite, no chance to actually sit down and let the information soak in so that we can fully understand it. And again, the world of the 24-hour news cycle that constantly changes, it's so hard to keep up with that stuff, and it overloads the brain, which makes it so that either people suffer burnout and stop paying attention to what's going on, or they get too deep into it, and that's all they focus on is all that negativity and stuff, and they don't see the goodness that could be there.
Oh man, yeah. There's so many wounded people out there who are, I think, they're sort of possessed by darkness to a large degree. Like it's like, what was Dante's Inferno? It says that when you look into hell stares back at you. You want to know about satanic pedophilia, child trafficking, ritual satanic abuse, and things of that nature? There is going to be a cost to learning that knowledge, and I ain't talking about money.
Nope. No, it's hardcore mental toll when you get into that kind of stuff, especially the ritual child abuse. That, oh man. I've had instances where I've had to walk away for like months on end, not look at anything conspiracy related because of that. It would, like, after doing like a deep dive in 2016, 2017 into that whole satanic pedophilia thing, I took a year off. I just stopped researching anything conspiracy related for a year because I just traumatized myself too much with the information I looked at.
Yep. So that is the danger that all of you face, ladies and gentlemen, and hermaphrodites. The danger of knowing something so horrific and not thinking it, but knowing it and not being able to deny it, not being able to ignore it, being forced to accept it. This is the grief process, okay? First you deny it, then you're angry with it. Then you try to bargain with it. Then it makes you depressed. And then, and this is a phase that most people never reach, you accept that it is going on and then do something about it. Okay? Mm-hmm. You can't do something about something that you haven't accepted that is going on. All right? And that, I think, is the vast majority of the population. In a nutshell, they have no idea what's going on, and so they'll be completely incapable of doing anything about it until they have obtained the knowledge and want to pay that price. Who here is willing to pay the price of enlightenment? Who here is willing to pay the ferryman to go across the river Styx into Hades to rescue the princess?
Well, that's the whole deal with the devil thing, right? When you make that deal with the devil to gain that knowledge, to learn that knowledge, that's what they're talking about there. Is you have to be willing to understand that there is darkness in this world, and you have to be willing to accept that darkness exists, or else you're not going to be able to understand the enlightenment when it comes.
Perfect place to leave it. Mike Sherwin, Ground Zero Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me again. It was awesome, and we'll have to do this again at another time for sure.
Final statement?
Final statement. I'm going to go with the promotion route. Go over to groundzero.radio or aftermath.media and sign up for one of the subscriptions that we got. Right now we're offering free month on a premium subscription and $13 a month after that. So head over to groundzero.radio and sign up today.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for supporting. In many cases, people have been supporting me for well over a decade, like almost since I began. And they do that in New Zealand by going to the KIWIBANK bank account, which is 38-9010-0455-296-00. You'll have to rewind that in order to get the numbers again if you want to write them down. And the bank account name is Guerrilla Media, GUERILLA Media. And for those of you internationally, you can either support me on the sly through my Patreon. In fact, I'm gonna recreate another Patreon Vinny Eastwood thing, because people are looking for Vinny Eastwood. They're not looking for Vinny and the Vendettas. And more to the point, I can start posting conspiracy stuff again, just as long as I don't violate that misinformation thing. Frustrating, you know. Anyway, the whole idea, ladies and gentlemen, is that you have a peer-to-peer economy. That means I create the content for free and give it to you for free. And if you appreciate it and you believe that it helps you or other people or the world in some way, and you're willing to give some of your energy in order to make that production continue, that is why you support things like Ground Zero Radio and the Vinny Eastwood Show and Billy TK, Free NZ Media, Counterspin, the New Zealand facets of the truth movement on here, with your energy in the form of money. Now, it seems kind of like a lot of people were, what was it? I think I was talking to Calvin from Counterspin Media, and he's like, "Oh, Vinny, I don't want to ask for donations. People will call me a grifter." I go, "Well, are you a grifter, Calvin? Do you ask for things that you don't need and spend it on crap and what have you, just so you can live the high life?" He's like, "No." Well, those people who call you a grifter would be wrong then, wouldn't they, if they called you that? He's like, "Yeah, okay." Do you want people who are wrong to dictate what you do with your life? You see, if you're being honest and you're being straightforward and you're not grifting off of people, anybody who accuses you of such is just trying to troll you. Just block them and continue asking the good people for their voluntary support in an honest way and tell them exactly what you need. For example, and I want to see if I can bring this up here. I have serious doubts he's sent it to me. Justin from Counterspin Media, I believe he needs, what, $500-600, I believe, because the police took all his equipment in the raid on Counterspin Media. Okay? Took all his equipment. And he needs a new microphone, a new mic stand, and a new internet router. And price tag of all of those individually, I'm not 100% sure. However, I believe it's around about the $500 to $600 mark that we're talking about here. And I said as long as he just sent me a list of all the things that he needed, I'd try and raise the money for him. And this is what you would consider, in the ordinary world, a competing media organization. And I'm going to try and raise money for them just because it's the right thing to do. This is how I operate. I don't follow other people's stupid rules if it means that I can't do the right thing. If I can't do what I feel in my heart I should be doing. I can't do it. I can't go to a job where somebody tells me what to do, and I can't say no without consequences. My nervous system goes into shock. I have panic attacks in those type of environments, people bossing me around and stuff like that. My consciousness, my trauma, all of it can't handle it. But you know what I can do? I can work with damn near anybody and create collaboratively with them incredibly amazing things. And I do so very, very regularly. And if you are one of those people that needs help creating your own media, you want to learn how to live stream. And when I say learn, I mean you've got Vinny Eastwood talking to you for a couple of hours, and not just talking, but you are downloading the program, and as Vinny's showing you, pointing at this, clicking at that, no jargon, and you've got your live stream set up. If you want to know how to edit video, you've got Vinny Eastwood on the call. He can see your screen through the Skype, and he's telling you, shorten that clip, use this tool, such and such, blah, 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 no jargon, help you edit a video once through. There's so much repetition involved with the digital production of content that by the time I've instructed you on how to do even one thing, you virtually don't need any further instruction because A, it's already set up, or B, you've had so much repetition of the process that you can now do it without anybody's help, and you're now an independent content producer, which is incredibly important at this day. Do you know how to record audio? Do you know what kind of microphone you need? Equipment? Have you got a website yet? Do you know how to find a website that you can create for free with no money down, that is just drag and drop and incredibly easy to build by yourself so that you don't need to pay a web guy? I can do that with you, not for you, with you, so that you learn while we're doing it. Do you know how to get revenue off of those kind of things? Do you have a Google AdSense account? Do you have a monetized YouTube channel? Do you have a Patreon account, a PayPal account? Do you know how to create the PayPal buttons? Do you know how to ask for things that you need, right? All of these skills and templates you need to become a completely independent, self-sustaining online media entity. Quick and easy, especially even for the elders and the technophobic who find it very, very difficult and think that you're wasting my time because you're a little bit slow or something like that. You will be surprised and amazed, and you will adore me because of the amount of patience that I have for you, because of the understanding of how difficult it is starting this stuff up for the first time, because I had to do it all by myself. Okay? I think maybe half a dozen times throughout the course of my 16 years of being a broadcaster, I needed somebody else's help to show me how to do something or to set one thing out for me. And I am so grateful for that. And Amos 777 has just given me $77.70 on the YouTube there. If anybody wants to match that, we'd be very grateful. Amos is another person who I've helped inspire to set up his show. He says I've helped him a lot there in the chat. And so guys, email me, give me your details, and I will help you as long as you're not wasting my time, okay? If you're a coward, okay, and you just say that you want to do this, and you're not willing to make the sacrifices that are actually necessary, you're not only wasting my time, you're wasting mankind's time. All right? The world is coming to an end. This is the last days of war, people. If this is what you want to do, or if you even think that this is what you want to do, even if you're wrong, you'll find out that you're wrong and stop daydreaming about wanting to become a broadcaster like the people you admire and realize it's not really your calling and you want to go off and do something else. Just do it. And if you're too incapable of doing it just by yourself, there is no shame in that. There is no shame ever in asking for help to do the right thing and to change your life for the better. There is no shame in it. And I'm very grateful to everybody who donates to me, who watches the show, who subscribes, who likes, who shares the broadcast. You guys, you may not recognize this in yourselves, but I've met enough of you, listeners to the Vinny Eastwood show, to know, not feel, not think, but know that you're very important and very special, and you're not like everybody else, and there's parts of you that other people should have. Your character, your creativity, your humor, and your skills. Everybody who I've talked to who's ever been a listener to this show has got those in spades. So if you're here, you've already made it to that level. And if you want my help, I'll help you to take you to the next level. Thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, and hermaphrodites. My fellow slaves of the global plantation. The Vinny Eastwood Show is bad news. It's like the news, but so much worse. It's the lighter side of genocide. Just because we're being exterminated doesn't mean we can't enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point of being killed? The Vinny Eastwood Show, where the only thing worse than living in a high-tech global police state run by child trafficking Satanists is Vinny's jokes.